Love is reaching for the lost and for the lame. Love is reaching for the grieving and the shamed. Stretched across all time and story, calling us to come. All the burdened and the broken find their healing in the song.
You are watching Love Stories. And today I wanted to take a little departure into Exodus. Not that I haven't visited Exodus before, but a specific part of Exodus. And I'd like to begin in Exodus 19. This is a little bit of a long reading. And again, I'm going to kind of, as I do with many other scriptures that I share here on Love Stories, I'm just going to add my commentary as we go, nothing particularly scholarly or theologically one way or another, but just adding my commentary as a layperson, thinking about what these words mean in my life and in my world as I see it. So I like to actually begin in Exodus 19, and I start in verse 10, because I want to paint the scene for you. I want you to think about what this looks like. Sometimes when we talk about the 10 Commandments, or as I put them on the title, the 10 words, or as they're referred to in other places as the Decalogue, which actually means in Greek 10 words. They're so removed from their setting. We don't hear them anywhere near the way the Israelites heard them. And I want you to think about, as I'm reading this precursor to the 10 Commandments, what the scene is, because it's also the scene, the setting, the understanding of what's going on that makes these words luminous, profound, what they have been through the centuries and generations. So in verse 10 of chapter 19 of Exodus, "And the Lord said to Moses, Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people." I think it's interesting, he wants them to set themselves apart from everything. And he's going to detail that a little more, that they would prepare themselves, right, for 2 days even. Prepare themselves entirely. That would be evening to evening to evening, okay? Because a day in the Hebrew calendar begins with the evening, okay? It's evening to evening. So he wants them to, wash their clothes and be ready by the third day. And I think, again, it's interesting that it's the third day, right? Jesus is in the tomb for 2, and then he rises on the third day. Numbers do play an interesting part in the whole telling of the scripture. So they have echoes. So put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not approach the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain is to be put to death. This is really harsh. But I think that as I read it and I think about it from my perspective, the Lord is establishing his holiness. He has no connection with sin. He is holy. And anything that's compromised, or anyone that's compromised by the fallenness and the sinfulness, cannot really approach that holiness. He's holy, period, end of story. And he's establishing that. He's making that more real to the Israelites. They have seen some of his power. They saw the splitting of the Red Sea. They saw the plagues in Egypt. They have been, fed and kept brought to this point, to Mount Sinai. And he's establishing his holiness in this. They are to be stoned or shot with arrows, not a hand is to be laid on them. No person or animal shall be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they approach the mountain. So only on God's terms. Only when God makes that window happen can they approach the mountain. Even the animals, anything, anyone, anything, any animal, nothing. He's holy. And no one can approach him except that he makes a way for them to approach. That's important because he makes a way for us to approach through his Son, Jesus, and his sacrifice. After Moses had gone down the mountain to the people, he consecrated them, and they washed their clothes. Then he said to the people, "Prepare yourselves for the third day. Abstain from sexual relations." On the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now, you wake up and you hear these things, but you do not see a trumpet. You see the cloud. You see the thunder and the lightning, right? And like it says, everyone in the camp trembled. This is a demonstration of his power. The sound goes throughout the earth, the thunder and the lightning, all of this. And then they see that, in verse 18, Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. How big is God? Well, he's bigger than the mountain. Well, he's bigger than the whole earth, really. He's the maker of mountains and valleys and seas and lakes and the whole earth. He's the maker of the universe. He's the one who created the stars. How big is God? And God is coming to this mountain in some way, shape, or form to be with the people he has called out of the loins of Abraham and Sarah. The Lord, as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. So now, on top of the thunder and lightning, we have the audible voice of God answering Moses, whatever that sounds like. Okay, in one place, I think in Psalms, it's described as the sound of many waters. In the story of Elijah running from Queen Jezebel in 1 Kings 19, it's a whisper. So I don't think it was a whisper here. If you got the thunder and the lightning and the sound of the trumpet louder and louder, the voice of God answers Moses. So the Lord descended to the top of Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain. So Moses went up, and the Lord said to him, "Go down and warn the people so they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them perish. Even the priests who approach the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them." Okay, so this business of being consecrated, of really being purified, of being kind of like, just stripped down of all the excess stuff, is really crucial to God. No one is to force their way through to see God. But the thing that happens is that the people are so frightened by the sights and sounds that they eventually send Moses to go be with God. They don't want to actually connect with God as a whole. But I'm getting before myself. I'm getting ahead of myself. So Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up Mount Sinai because you yourself warned us. Put limits around the mountain and set it apart as holy. And again, this is a key word here, holy. That God is calling them to set themselves apart as holy. The mountain is holy. He is holy. The Lord replied, go down and bring Aaron up with you, but the priests and the people must not force their way through to come up to the Lord, or he will break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them. Okay, and that ends chapter 19. And the whole idea is just that, yes, the people come out to the foot of the mountain, but even coming out to the foot of the mountain is a huge deal. And only Moses and Aaron can come up, right? But the people are at the base of the mountain and they're watching the thunder and the lightning and they're hearing the trumpet and they're listening for the voice of God. And it is in this setting that he lays forth, he speaks the 10 words or the 10 commandments, the Decalogue, to the Israelites as a nation. And God spoke all these words. And this is partly why I think the 10 commandments or the 10 words stand out from the other laws. There are in total in Torah 613 laws. Okay? I mean, all through Leviticus. I don't know so much in numbers, but I mean, all through the first 5 books, well, through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, law is laid out, and there are 613 laws, okay? But they're not all orally given by God. These first 10 are given orally by God, because then the people are just so freaked out. They tell Moses, you go talk to him and report back to us, okay? You tell us what he said and we'll obey what he says. Yeah. But I think that we needed to hear him as a people. We needed to experience his manifestation to take seriously what he was saying, what he is saying. So onward to the 10 words. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Now, the Jewish people were enslaved to the Egyptians for over 400 years. And even when God brought them out, they did not know how to live as free men and women. Their mentality over the generations was still mired in the slave mentality. It took, well, as you know, they did not enter the promised land when God invited them to enter the promised land. They freaked out, and they freaked out many times during their journey in the wilderness. And when it came to entering the promised land, they completely freaked out, except for Joshua and Caleb, and then were relegated to living their lives 40 years in the wilderness until that generation passed away, because that generation couldn't get past their fears, their uncertainty, the slave mentality they had come out of Egypt with. They were delivered in their bodies from slavery, but they were not delivered in their minds or their psyches. They were not. They had not come to trust him. It's always kind of mind-blowing to me why they didn't trust him, because he's God. Did he not do enough signs and wonders to show them how absolute his power was, and that if he said he was going to do something, he is going to do it? So we can always look at the Israelites and go, what idiots, seriously, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to trample, that whole thing, but it's like, what kind of, what's your problem here? Okay. He's feeding you manna, and he's bringing water out of a rock, and he sends down quail, and then he does all the scary stuff, like the earth opens up, and like, what is the problem here? That you can't see him as God. Well, you can't trust him entirely. Just forget all the wilderness stuff. Like, aren't the 10 plagues enough? Isn't the Red Sea enough? The fire at night and the cloud by day? What one of those things is not enough for you to believe him entirely and to entrust yourself to him? He's your maker. Okay. But, we are like this. And so I can't go around indicting the Israelites when I'm worse. Okay. The Spirit of God lives in me, and I still fail to trust God the way that I should trust him. And I still act like I'm some kind of idiot who doesn't know that God is real, and that he's like Emmanuel right here with me, God with me, and for me and not against me, and all of the things that could be said. But this is true of us. We're so fickle. We're so, our faith is just, like this, So we're no better than them. They're an example to us, but we still follow in their footsteps more than we should, So, yeah. So he says, you shall have no other gods before me. That's such a heavy thing, right? Because so many times, somebody comes to the Lord and they incorporate Jesus with all the other things in their life, right? And it's like, no. No, because I'm going to try and make Jesus fit in to, my little niche for Jesus. And it's like, actually, Jesus is Lord over all the other stuff you got going on. So whatever that is, whether it's meth or pornography or alcoholism or verbally abusing your wife or physically abusing her or the jealousy or the, I think I'll have an open marriage, because this isn't working, or, I don't love my husband anymore, or, pick a few. I don't forgive anybody. I don't want to forgive that person. I'm the judge of that person. It's like, if you start to get to know Jesus, he's going to basically topple all your idols. He's going to expose them, and then he's going to topple them. And if you don't let him topple them, and if you fight him on that, then you're really not trusting him. Again, you're really not trusting him. You have to yield. And the good thing about the Lord is that, he doesn't require us to give it all up in one fell swoop. Now, I know there are people who come to the Lord and they're delivered from their addiction, whatever it may be, or they're delivered, in some way. And that's awesome. But then there are all these other things that are still at work in us, the brokenness that brought us to the point of being an addict in some way or another, and that has to be dealt with, and God works in our lives over time to deliver us entirely and to heal us completely. So you shall have no other gods before me. And that's real. because in the end, we're going to entirely bow down before him, lay our crowns down before him, because there is nobody else. There is no other true and living God. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. I've always wondered about this one, the idea of an image. We're people who are physical as well as spiritual, right? And so there are certain physical things that God has decreed for our lives as a way of worshiping him. The feast days, communion, baptism, these are physical acts. These are physical things. And yet the whole business of trying to portray God and worship him, because that's what happened. They made an idol. They made a golden calf when Moses was away for 40 days and 40 nights with God on top of the mountain for the first set of commandments on the stone tablets. They couldn't wait. The Israelites couldn't wait for Moses to come down. They didn't know what happened to him. It was too long for them. They couldn't trust, again, their ability to trust, their ability to wait, their ability to continue in faith and believe that God was real was not there. And so they had Aaron put together a golden calf. Well, the golden calf was actually supposed to be symbolic of the God who delivered them out of Egypt, ironically. So they made an image, and they did this after they heard God say, don't do that, right? And aren't we like that? I mean, we're a lot like that, right? As soon as you say, don't look over here, I certainly want to look over here. If you say, don't touch that, man, my whole attention is, can I touch that? I mean, it's a human thing, right? The law almost provokes the response. Don't touch it. I want to touch it. When can I touch it? How soon can I touch it? So the Israelites, right? They make a golden calf, because they can't see God and they need something they can see and touch. But see, the golden calf, by making the golden calf, it creates a whole other atmosphere, and they end up in debauchery and defilement and kind of like an orgy and all of this going on, when God has established, like as I read to you in Exodus 19, the holiness of who he is, the absolute holiness of who he is, and the need to be holy in his presence, right? And it's not like God can't see them. I mean, they must think on some level that God can't see them, but, it's not like Santa Claus. He knows when you're naughty and nice, that kind of thing. I mean, that's so, God is so much more. I mean, he sees our souls. He understands the way we are. So they make the golden calf and it completely defiles them. So much so that Moses comes down the mountain and he breaks the stone tablets and they, they go through this whole ordeal with God because they couldn't wait. They still didn't understand as much as he manifested his power and his glory, they still didn't understand who he is and how holy he is. See, we talk about Jesus being our friend. You know, we like to talk about Jesus being our friend, and that's fine. You know, he's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Okay, that's good. And that he is merciful and kind. Yes, he is. But he's also holy. He's also holy. And we defile him. We defile ourselves, or, you know, our relationship with him daily. Daily. We take him for granted on so many levels. We do little things, we do big things. We're oblivious. We're not even thinking, you know, that we're doing any kind of damage here, you know, because he understands. He's our friend. Well, he's also holy. That's a 4-letter word, holy. You know, I think about all the 4-letter words that are not holy. You know, that's a 4-letter word that is powerful. It has weight with God, if not with us. It means something. You know, it means something. And I don't think that we grasp all that it means when God says he's holy. You know, we still act the way we act. And then we ask Jesus to forgive us, and he does, 70 times 7 and so much more. But just because he does, just because it says sin, where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more, does not mean that he has stopped being holy or calling us to be holy, calling us to respond to his holiness. Well, I think that's pretty much all we have time for this little segment. But I want to commend to you the idea of the holiness of God, that there is something to understand about fearing the Lord, reverencing him enough, respecting him enough, that we want to please him, and we don't want to step over those boundaries that God has made for us. That those boundaries are to keep us in the place of blessing. And we want to be mindful of that. And now, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. This is Sally Klein O'Connor, and you have been watching Love Stories. Till next time, shalom.